It is Tuesday night, which means it is time for the Hammer and Nail Show. I'm Jack Hammer of the Santa Rosa Press Democrat, and with me, as always, my co-host Jesse Naylor from Last Second Sports. How you doing tonight, Jesse?
I am doing fantastic, Jack. Not as good as I was on Sunday after the loss, but I'm over it. I'm already over it. I'm ready to talk about it. I'm ready to get the last bit of losing scum off my chest, and let's figure this thing out. Let's hash it out.
There you go, because we're it's already Tuesday. We're a couple days removed. Tomorrow, the team starts getting ready for their next matchup on coming up Sunday against the Chiefs. So it's a good time to kind of go back and take a look at kind of where we are, where the team is, and kind of starting off. I think the first place we can start off is the 49ers being 0-26 when they're down by more than 4 points heading into the fourth quarter. That was a stat that Josh Dubow of AP put out shortly after. I think it was right after the game on Sunday, or maybe it was even during the game because I didn't see it until other people had started talking about it. What are your thoughts on that stat?
It's crazy to me, and it gets even worse. I think he talked about the stat even further. They're 1 of 35 if they're trailing at any point during the fourth quarter, being down by more than 4, and they're 3 of 33 and 37 in games where it's at the 4-point mark or more. So basically 4 points anyway, they're losing if they're down, which is crazy because the flip side of that, and I don't know what the numbers were. I was unable to get them to answer me. And it's not a lot, but I had asked the question, okay, vice versa, when they're up by 4 points or more, how many times have they lost those games? We don't know the exact number, but what we do know is it's more than the games that they've come back and won, being down by 4 points or more in the fourth quarter, because the two games that stand out are the NFC Championship game and the Super Bowl. So just overall, I don't know, it's crazy. Like we talked about a couple weeks ago, Shanahan doesn't have to be a quote unquote offensive genius to be a good head coach. But when you are an offensive guy and your offense is not only struggling, but it's one of the worst offenses in the league at times, that's a little baffling. You can't be an offensive guy and have that poor of an offense in big spurts. For example, the 49ers right now are ranked 26th in the NFL in second half scoring. 26th. That's almost as bad as it gets when Matt Patricia, defensive coordinator Matt Patricia, who got fired by the Lions, is the offensive coordinator with Bailey Zappi at quarterback, and they're putting up more points a game than the San Francisco 49ers with all the weapons they have. At some point, it is a problem. So I don't know what to make of it. I just know that it is a major issue, and it's not an isolated problem. This is a problem that's been going on for quite some time. And, people want to talk about the quarterbacks and all these other things. I've got a stat. I'll let you do your thing, but I'm sure we'll get back around to it. That is just pertaining to the 21 and 22 season that I think will blow people's minds as well. You're muted.
That was probably for the better, but I was going to say I don't know what your stat is that you're going.
That was a bunch of F-bombs.
That's right. That's why I had to mute myself. No, I mean I saw it. I didn't really think a whole lot about it at first, and then I started looking at it a little bit more, and I kept seeing the comments about this, and everybody's like, "Well, it's really not that bad because look at the names on that list. Look at how often you see guys not named Jimmy Garoppolo, and look at yada yada, whatever it takes." This is typical. Fans will do this. People that are fans are going to look for whatever way that they can make the team look better. I get it. And so that's, you see people trying to make that stat not look bad. But so I took a few minutes, didn't take long. I just went through and looked at what the 49ers have done with Jimmy Garoppolo at quarterback and how often they've been able to do it. And I believe the number I came up with was 0-10 when Jimmy Garoppolo has been the quarterback. So forget about, the days of, Nick Mullins and CJ Beathard. That's a joke. CJ Beathard. And, the other guys that started at quarterback for him, Brian Hoyer and so on. just focus on just Jimmy Garoppolo for a minute. Even take Jimmy, heck, let's throw Trey Lance in there because Trey Lance could be in there too. If you put Jimmy Garoppolo and Trey Lance together, the game started by those two. The 49ers are 0-12 in those situations because it happened twice twice with Lance as well. So I believe I don't remember. I'd have to go back and look at what the number was in Chicago, but still, regardless, it's a bad number. And I understand, like, there's been instances that the 49ers have come back in the fourth quarter, like, being down 7 in Los Angeles and came back and tied that in regulation, won it in overtime. I get it. But to not be able to overcome a touchdown, overcome a situation where you need to score a touchdown at least to win the game and not be able to do it as often as these guys have, that's a concern. And it, I think it speaks volumes for where this team is today.
Yeah, they don't play complete games very often. Offensively, they don't. And let me see if I can find this stat real quick. So I tweeted this out yesterday. The 49ers, so in 2021 and 2022, so this is with Jimmy Garoppolo and Trey Lance, okay? So none of those backups, anything like that. They've played 52 halves of football, if you include the playoffs. 26 games, 52 halves. 20 of those halves, they have scored 7 points or less. So essentially, what are we talking? 38% of the time, they score 7 points or less in a half. 11 of those, so 20% of the time, they haven't even scored a touchdown in a half. So they've gone 11 halves without scoring a touchdown. And in 4 of those, they've been completely shut out in a half. That's tied with the Bears and the Jets over the same time frame. And for context, the Jets got shut out in a game. So that was 2 of their 4 halves were came in one game. So the 49ers are on par in a bad way with some really, really bad teams that are trying to find their way. It just, I don't understand. I don't understand it. It's complete games, regardless of the quarterback. I mean, it only points to one person. There's only one answer to this question on whose fault this is. So people take that for what it is.
No, it's again, you go through this season and where the 49ers are right now, and it's a mess. And I think overall, we'll get into, I know one of the things we want to talk about today is how good is this 49ers team, because we'll get into that. I don't want to get too far down the road, but no, I'm with you. I think that the situation that the 49ers are finding themselves in right now is a tough one. And I saw it mentioned that the NFL as a whole scoring is down, whatever. I mean, the NFC right now has 4 teams above 500. 49ers are one of those at 500. So they're on the positive side of that, kind of that number. But when you look at who they've played, the 49ers right now shouldn't be 3-3. When we talked before the season started and we went through our schedules and we said what are, who the wins and what game they're going to win, what game they were going to lose. When I said if they're 3-3 after the first 6 weeks, they're in trouble. And that's exactly where they are. And they've lost they've been better than every team that they've played. There's no team that they've played against this year where the opponent had a better roster than theirs. It's all about execution, and that all goes back to one guy, and that's Kyle Shanahan.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. And again, I know this is the popular thing this week. This is not me even saying fire Kyle. It's just we got to have answers. At some point, we got to have answers. And the biggest thing I'm saying is just stop making excuses. There's always something. It's always an excuse with why we can't get things done. People that are great and do great things in life, they remove the excuses and they just do. They just get things done. And if you want to be a great coach, you just got to make things happen sometimes. Every team deals with injuries. Every team deals with crazy things, crazy fan bases, crazy weather, turf, whatever the excuse is that we want to make, you just gotta get it done at some point. You have to get it done.
Yeah, no, that's what it comes in. That's what your job is, and especially in the NFL. It's wins and losses. It doesn't matter how good of a play caller is. At the end of the day, if your team isn't winning games, you're eventually going to get fired. And I'm with you. I'm not here saying that Kyle Shanahan should be fired, but questions should be asked. And at a point, he should be fired. And the article I wrote yesterday, I said you give him probably through next year, and this thing just turns into a dumpster fire now. But you got to give them, I think, 1 year with Trey Lance, and then we had this conversation last year, Jesse, when they were 3-5. I think they're not at that point yet, but again, it shouldn't take 6, 7, 8 weeks, 9 weeks into the season before you figure out what your team is and how to win games. The 49ers don't have an identity under Kyle Shanahan, and I think that's their biggest problem. They're thought to be a running team but at the same time, when the run, if they fall behind a little bit, the run goes away. And in the fourth quarter of games, unless they're up by double digits, the run goes away too. In those situations, he did it in Atlanta, and he's done it since he showed up here with the 49ers. And just a lot of interesting pieces when it comes to Kyle Shanahan moving forward.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, it's definitely something to monitor. And again, I said it, I think when they were 2-2, that Shanahan can prove a lot, even in a losing season. He really can prove a lot in how he rallies the troops. But I don't know. I feel like something's just off with this team. I really can't tell you what it is. It's a feeling. That's all I can give you. But it's a feeling much like if you go into an establishment, whether, it's a retail location or a restaurant or whatever, sometimes you go in and you just have that feeling like it's just not well run here. Like the people aren't friendly. Music isn't up. Something's off. There's something off about this vibe in this place. You can't put your finger on it. You don't know the inner workings of the employees or things like that, but you just know I don't feel welcome here. That's the way that I feel with the 49ers right now. I don't know what it is, but man, something is off with this team. And I wish I could give you the answer. I wish I could say, hey, if they did this, they would get this result. I don't know. I mean, we're not in the front office. We're not a part of the team. But this is even different than the 3-5 last year to me. It is. I don't know. There's something off with this team, and I'm curious to see if they can turn it around.
Well, Chrissy asked, "What's the remedy?" So I'm going to give you. I'm going to give you one remedy real quick. You use your best players, and when you need to make a play, you go to your best players. And this goes back to week 1. I know that George Kittle was hurt. But Trey Lance misses a deep shot that's wide open, but he's throwing to Tyler Kroft, who wasn't even on the team until I think training camp already started. Right? You go into Denver, and Denver's a little bit different. I think Denver was about Garoppolo just blowing it. You had a quarterback just miss throw after throw, and not hit things, and there was some mistakes up front on your offensive line, that kind of stuff. This last week, this is different. It's the beginning of the second half. It's the second play of the second half. Deebo Samuel's not on the field, and you're throwing a deep shot to the guy that's replaced him in Ray McLeod. I mentioned on Twitter yesterday, why is that not going? Danny Gray, and I put that in my article yesterday about Danny Gray should have been out there getting those deep balls, because that's who you would expect is the new guy, right? And then I'm watching the film today. I realized that Deebo Samuel's not on the field, and I'm like, why is that ball? Why is it going to Deebo Samuel's replacement, not Deebo Samuel? And it's not just that play. It's the next possession, and it's Charlie Warner down the middle of the field having the ball bounce off of his face. I mean, it hit his hands, but the ball hit him right in the face. That should have been an easy catch. Why is Ross Dwelley not being used at all?
Yep.
He's played 13 snaps of offense since Charlie Warner came back, and he's had one target. I know that Ross Dwelley might not be the best run blocker in the world. He's not necessarily the greatest guy after the catch, but Ross Dwelley has good hands. And I know that he's kind of become like a little bit, people think of it as a joke a little bit when you bring him up, but that's just a dead ass correct statement, is that he has the best hands of all the tight ends on this team, and they don't utilize them. Why is Tevin Coleman playing on this team? And you have Jordan Mason standing on the sidelines doing nothing other than playing special teams. It makes no sense. And again, you watch the film from the game the other day, and Jeff Wilson Jr., gotta love him, but he's running on the second play of the game, they're running a toss to the right side. It's an inside zone kind of a run. It's tossed to get into the zone, but it's not really supposed to be a sweep. And there's a hole there's a hole. He doesn't have the wheels to get through the hole. I know that people love Jeff Wilson Jr., but when Jeff Wilson Jr. makes big runs, that's because Jeff Wilson Jr. is running through a hole that Jessie can run through, and I can run through, because I mean, I'm not making fun of your size, but I'm saying because it's so big, right? I mean, it's wide open, and you can, and it's like the Red Sea is parting when he on that 41-yard run that he had in Carolina. It's a great run by Jeff Wilson, but holy smokes, that thing was blocked up good. And this one, you've got a hole, you've got a crease. He doesn't have the wheels to get through there, and he gets hit, he gets knocked down, and that kind of stuff. I don't know. Maybe I'm going to be proven to be wrong and proven to be completely off my rocker as the season goes forward, and these guys are all of a sudden going to step up and but Jeff Wilson Jr. has never been that guy in his career. So all of a sudden he's now at year 6 or whatever it is in the NFL. He's all of a sudden going to become something that he's never been. I don't know.
Yeah, and I mean, you look at it, Jimmy Garoppolo played his worst game all season, and one of his worst games in a 49er uniform against Denver. They still put up 10 points. He plays a pretty good game, I would say. I mean, I know he had the picks, but I actually thought Jimmy was pretty good this game. I'm not going to pick him apart. I thought he played a pretty good game. Not one of his better games, but a good game, and they still only put up 14. So at some point, it's not just him, right? And so change it up. Like what are you missing out on by not playing a Jeff Wilson Jr. as much, or not playing Tevin Coleman? Wilson has fumbling issues. He always has. He's fumbled twice already this season. So you've got that risk. What is so bad about trying out one of these young kids for 7 touches in a game? What's the worst that's going to happen? They're going to be not explosive and fumble the ball. They're already doing that. So like, there's just not any difference. I don't understand. Kyle has this thing where he does not want to play rookies unless he's forced to. Man, you can't develop players quick enough if that's always the philosophy, especially the way that your teams get injured, because you always end up needing to rely on one of these guys at some point, and they're not ready for the moment. It's all of a sudden you're 3-5 or under 500, and it's like, well, we don't really have any other option. Run out there and go win us this game. They're not ready for the moment. I mean, what do you expect, man? Like, what is the expectation of these kids? You show them all the time you're not confident in them. I'm not confident. I'm not, and you don't have to say it. You're just not playing them. You're not giving them the opportunity to grow and gain that confidence. So you're basically telling them that you're not confident in them, and then all of a sudden you need to rely on them, and then your words of saying I'm confident in you are supposed to just get the best out of these players. Like, that's not how life works. It's not how life works. It's the strangest thing.
Yeah, and I'm going to make one last comment, and this is on Tevin Coleman. And I know that I said Jordan Mason earlier about, why is Jordan Mason not playing and getting those reps that Tevin Coleman's getting? It goes beyond that. Why is Ty Davis Price not getting those carries? Because I can understand, Kyle Shanahan said it, and then he reeled it back, because when they had the injuries early on, and they brought in Marlon Mack, he right around that point, he had mentioned how the young guys need to do better at things, and it's pretty clear that I think the reason that they're not playing is because he doesn't trust them in pass protection, because that's the only thing that makes sense. Ty Davis Price showed that he can run the ball when they gave him an opportunity against Seattle. Jordan Mason showed that he can run the ball throughout the preseason. The one time he's carried the ball this year, he picked up 7 yards. Going back to Ty Davis Price, I thought he was one of the best pass protectors out of the linemen during drills this year in training camp. And then in this game, he got one snap, against Atlanta on a toss sweep to the left side that was a toss to when he was put at fullback to block for Deebo Samuel, and he lit up the linebacker. He lit him up. He knocked him on his ass, and you have Samuel pick up 7 yards. That's the kind. I don't get it. I don't understand what you're doing. Hey, you lose this week, you're going to be 3-4, and you're putting yourself in a really tough situation because there's a huge logjam here with all these teams at 3-3, and somebody's going to get left out. And I understand the NFC West is pretty weak, but at some point you need to start looking beyond just your own division.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, and you're going to need some of these tiebreakers. And right now, it's not looking great for some of those tiebreakers. You're 2-0 in the division, which is good, but you've lost to the Falcons, you've lost to the Bears. Those are both NFC teams. So if you get in a situation where you need tiebreakers versus other teams, if you don't for some reason win the division, and you need tiebreakers versus some of these other teams, guess what they go to? Your record versus the NFC. And the 49ers, not it right now. So it's crazy. This is nuts. Who were there? Actually, you can pull up the next topic. I'm going to look something up real quick.
Okay. Well, yeah, real quick. Well, while you're doing that, I want to pull up the super chat's been waiting up here for a while. I haven't been able to get to it because we were talking. But Ryan jumps in with the super chat. Ryan Hensley had a good time going on yesterday on his morning show that he started up, and I do the 8:45 slot every Monday with him. He says, "What's up, fellas? Nothing you can't build with nothing you can't build with hammer and nails. Have a great show." Absolutely, you need hammer and nails for everything that you build. Especially Kyle Shanahan might want to tune into the show. We got some good might every once in a while. We might be able to help him out a little bit. All right, Jesse, what'd you find?
Okay, I was just looking. So they started 3-5 last year?
They did.
What was their record through the first 6? Do you remember?
2-4.
Okay, 1, 2.
They were 2-4. They won their first 2 and they lost their next 4.
Okay.
And then they beat Chicago and then they lost to Arizona.
Okay. So last year at 2-4, at this point they had at least beaten a playoff team, the Eagles. They lost to 2 other playoff teams. Okay, so through the first 6 games, they had played three playoff teams.
Yeah, through those first 6. Yeah, but yes, the Eagles were a playoff team, but they weren't good in the first half of the season. Remember, they were very similar to the 49ers, right?
Right.
They were really, but they had Philadelphia and Arizona. Those are the 2 teams that were playoff teams that they
Green Bay.
Okay. Yep. So those 3.
So they had played 3 playoff teams. They had beaten 1, and they lost to 2. At this point, it looks like they have played possibly no playoff teams, and they're 3-3.
Well, right now, Atlanta is tied for first place in the. They're technically tied with Tampa for first in the South, right? They're both 3-3, but Tampa holds the tiebreaker over them.
Because Tampa just beat them the week before off of a BS call.
Yeah, exactly. So, the other thing too, you look at the numbers from the 2 seasons. The 49ers right now, I think they've scored 13 points less than they did last year through the first 6 weeks, but that's also flubbing a little bit because they have 14 points from their defense, right? So it's whatever. They're not playing well, and let's just talk about it really quick. Is this team even good? Are the 49ers
on paper, yes. On paper, yes, they are good as far as who they have, the talent level. Yes. But when you factor in injuries, you factor in the teams that they've played and lost to, they don't have a single team on the schedule yet that's over 500. None, including themselves. And they've lost to 2 teams with a losing record and 1 team that's 500. And they've beaten 3 teams that are either 500 or have losing records. They haven't played anybody good, and they're 3-3. They're not necessarily good, but Jack, I think they still might be good enough. And I say that because I think they still should win this division. I don't look at those other teams in the NFC West. They don't scare me. I don't look at them and say the 49ers can't run off a 5-1 record against them. So right now they're not good, but they might be good enough.
I think we've been talking about this, and I think they've have more talent on paper than every team they've played so far, and that's even with the injuries that they're having. Even with the injuries, I think they were a better team than Atlanta, and a better team than Denver, and a better team than Chicago. Now, the Denver game, I expected that one to be tight because I felt like Denver's defense was pretty good. That's kind of proving itself out as we go through. But still, that's a game that they should have won. And to be 3-3 right now, on paper they're a good team. In reality, they are mediocre, just like most of the NFC.
Yeah.
I think
mediocre is fair. That's what their record says. You are what your record says. Isn't that what Parcells said? So they're mediocre. That's fair.
Yeah. You are what your record says. You're mediocre, but you're still in first place in your division because your division is awful. But correct.
It's funny because we talked about this last week, something similar. And I know I talked about the same thing last week. And I said, well, yeah, because they were over 500. And I think the expectation was that they were just going to beat the Falcons. And then they'd be 2 games over 500. And, people would be getting healthy. And that's not the case. People are getting less healthy. And then they lost to the Falcons. All of a sudden, you're not necessarily a good team. So, I don't know. It's not yet anyways. I'm not saying they can't become one. They get healthy. They get hot at the right time. Things can happen. But right now, no, they're not.
That's right. Yeah. And Odd Job says the Eagles won like 7 games last year. They won 9. They were 9-8. And that's probably where the Niners are going to end up this year. Jaguayo comes in with the super chat. He says fumbles plus drops plus injuries plus penalties equals loss. Shake my head. Yeah, that's pretty much it. And, before I did my film breakdown for the channel this afternoon, a couple hours ago. So that's up. And that leads us into the next question though, Jesse. Are we seeing the best of Jimmy Garoppolo right now? Is Jimmy Garoppolo, is this the best that we've seen from him?
I don't think so. I'm hearing that a lot. I think we're seeing some different things from Jimmy. I will say that. I think he's doing some things, not a ton, but just some things that we haven't seen from him in the past, or at least consistently. Short sample size, but he's really, some of those shots that he's taken in one-on-one coverage while getting pile drived into the ground, that's not normally something you see from Jimmy. He's normally going to take the sack or, heaven forbid, throw a pick, what have you. So there are some things. He's taken some more chances, I feel like. I think the big time throw rate shows that he's taking more chances. So it's not just a feeling. He is taking more chances. But the question is this the best Jimmy we've seen? We're seeing a different Jimmy, but that different Jimmy isn't resulting in anything special or different from the overall result. No, this isn't the best Jimmy we've seen. We've seen some good stretches from Jimmy. We really have. You go back to 2019, there was about a 6-game stretch where he had like 3 games over 300 yards, 11 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. That's some pretty good football. I mean, you do that all year round and break that down over the course of the season. That's a really good, efficient season. But there's always a comeback for him. There's always a comeback down to reality. And 2021, I think we saw something maybe not quite as good as that 2019 season, but we saw a 6 or 7 game stretch that was pretty good as well. And then there's that comeback down to reality. And so different slightly, doing some different things. Yes. Better, the best. No, not at all.
Yeah. I would say, like, I guess it's kind of a tricky question, like the way that, is this the best we've seen of him? I would agree with you that it's probably not. I think it's probably on par with what we saw from him in 2019, probably, probably a little bit of what we saw from him last year down the second half of the season when the Friars went on their run a little bit. I know we're asking this question because so many people are talking about Jimmy Garoppolo being better. I'm not seeing it. I don't know. I went and watched again. I did the film breakdown, and I'm going to be doing a write-up here in a few minutes. And it's really, for me, it's like, I know the conversation is how good Jimmy Garoppolo was and how his weapons let him down. in this game because you had the drop by McLeod and the drop by Werner and so on and so forth. But how did Jimmy Garoppolo respond to those mistakes? He responded by making his own mistakes. And so I look at him and it's like, he is Jim. We know who Jimmy Garoppolo is, and we're not seeing anything different from Jimmy Garoppolo than what we've seen for the last couple of years. And it's, I on our show last week, I said, maybe he's turning the corner a little bit because of his interception percentage being down and those kind of things, but he just continues to fall back to the midpoint here. I know he had 2 interceptions. I don't really count the first one. I know it counts in the stats. When you watch the game, that was, he had to throw it deep to the corner because they didn't have a timeout, even though Brandon Ayuk was wide open down the middle. He's not going to score. Time's going to run out. It doesn't matter, So I don't know. I don't think that Jimmy Garoppolo is playing any differently than we've seen any other time other than the occasional deep ball that he's having to throw because the coach is forcing him to.
Yeah, absolutely. And Coach T brings up a good point. He says you cannot say that QB wins are not a stat and then say that his good play is not resulting in wins. You can't have it both ways. I don't know if I said wins. I think I said the results aren't any better, meaning there's a lot of way you can look at that, but these aren't the best numbers he's put together. I don't think this is the most, certainly not the most efficient he's been. I mean, was running at 7% under his completion percentage from the year prior. So his efficiency from that standpoint is down. Is if you take a few game stretch from 2019, those Cardinal games, he was putting up 400 yards and 4 touchdowns. So the numbers aren't the best. The points that the team is scoring certainly isn't the best, regardless of whether you win or lose. How many points is the offense putting up? They're not good there. So yeah, when I say results, I don't necessarily mean wins. And if I said wins, I didn't mean that. I just meant results overall. So yeah, I hear you. Definitely can't have it both ways, but that's not what I meant.
Yeah, I think you might have said something about wins, but I don't know for sure. But
I may have. I didn't mean to say wins. I meant results.
Mr. G4900 says, would your answer be different if those deep passes were completed? By the way, great breakdown, Jack. Well, I'm not sure exactly what this is relating to, but I'm gonna throw this out really quick, Jesse, because it was something that I saw you and Rich talking about on Twitter today. So, even if Jimmy Garoppolo hits those deep shots, it's unlikely because Ray McLeod's tripping as he's getting it. Let's say he catches it. It's unlikely that he's going to catch that and take it in the end zone just because he's already falling forward as the ball hits him in the hands. It's pretty unlikely that Charlie Warner is going to score a touchdown there. So we don't know if how that would have changed the game. I felt like Garoppolo played pretty good for the most part, but whatever. But let's just say that those 2 passes are completed, Jesse, and let's say that they don't score touchdowns there and make it a 28-28 game, because I think that's where most people are going with that, right? If they just catch those passes and Robbie Gould kicks field goals, we're looking at the rest of the game completely different, because now you're only down 28-20 when you get the ball for the never-ending drive in the fourth quarter, right? You get the ball there and it's 20, even after the Garoppolo pick on the second play of the fourth quarter, you get the ball back and you would still be down 28-20. That drive that took forever, they would have kicked a field goal and it would have been 28-23. And the way the game played out from that point on, they got the ball back again with a minute and a half to go. Now, would they have been able to score a touchdown down 5? History already, we talked about it earlier. History tells us no, right? But again, it changes so much if you just make the plays. Everything so much changes, and it's hard for so we're ripping Kyle Shanahan, but you got to make the plays.
Yeah, I mean, for sure, the plays were there to be made. And again, I'm not saying Jimmy's playing bad. I just don't think this is the best version of Jimmy we've seen. Like a lot of people are making it out to be. I don't think that's the case. But I also don't think he was the sole issue last game. The offense is an issue. Whatever part of the pie that you want to give to him on that, do that. I mean, that's up for everybody to decide on their own. But I didn't look at that game and be like, Jimmy's why they lost that game. I never once came away with that. I was pretty complimentary during the game. After the game, I've been pretty complimentary. I don't look at that and say that was on him. It's just the offensive performance as a whole, regardless of if it's Denver when it was Jimmy's fault, or this game when it's drop passes, or a bad game plan against so and so. Whatever. I mean, whatever it is, the offense as a whole is not doing well. They're just not. They're not scoring a lot of points, and it's happening more often than it's not happening. So wherever you want to place the blame pie, that's completely up to you. Everybody has their own, chunks and slices they want to divvy out. But at the end of the day, the offense is just not doing well as a unit. And Jimmy is a part of the offense, but he's not the only part of the offense.
Yeah, it's all across the board. We talked about, I mentioned the Debo thing with on the run. You miss a block, and then that so instead of if Debo Samuel makes the block on second and 3 play, if he just blocks the safety, it's a first down, and so then you're not running Jeff Wilson Jr. into the line of scrimmage on 3rd and 1, because that's not the situation that you put in. I'm pretty sure when Kyle Shanahan drew up his game plan and he put in his opening script that he didn't have a 3rd and 1. 22 formation dive into the middle of the line for Jeff Wilson Jr. to be that play, right? And anyway, I'm off track a little bit. James Foster with the super chat says, "Does Debo create separation, or does Kyle scheme separation for Debo?" What do you think?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think when you evaluate a receiver, there's 3 phases. There's before the catch, there's the catch point, and there's after the catch. And you look at Debo Samuel, he's the best in the league after the catch. Before the catch and at the catch point, I would say he's pretty average. So can he get separation? Yes. Does Kyle scheme up some good separation for him? Absolutely.
Yeah, I disagree with you. I would say that at the catch point, Debo Samuel is pretty good. We've seen a number of times where
he gets a lot of drops, though.
No, he does.
He drops the ball a lot.
Okay, so yes, you're right. From that standpoint, yes. I guess what I'm saying is we've also seen a number of times where there's been contested catches and he's come down with them, or, routes across the middle and Jimmy Garoppolo is throwing a route across the middle and he steps in front of the defender to catch it instead of, continuing straight across on his route because he knows that he's got to get to the ball before the defender. So I give him a little bit of a positive on that. I think when you look at this question, I think the answer is more towards the second part. I think there's more about Kyle Shanahan scheming Debo Samuel open than there is about Debo Samuel just getting open on his own. You can point to like the catch that he made on the deep ball against Chicago as, Samuel whatever, but I think a lot of him getting open is scheme related. I think that's the case with Brandon Ayuk too.
Yeah. Well, I think Ayuk is a pretty dang good route runner too. I've seen. Brandon Ayuk. I tweeted this out on Sunday as well. I feel like almost every time I look up, the number 1 corner is usually on Ayuk. I think that shows you what the rest of the league thinks about Brandon Ayuk and what he brings to the table. I also think some of that is because Debo, they move around a lot. He's in the backfield. It's like, how do you keep the number 1 corner on him when he's in the backfield? But Brandon Ayuk draws the number 1 corner quite a bit. And there are times, I think the Denver game, he was pretty well locked down against Surtain, who's a really good corner. But there are other times where he makes people look really, really silly, and he just doesn't get the ball.
Yeah. No, that's part of it. And having Jimmy Garoppolo, again, that plays a little bit of the role because Garoppolo's lack of arm strength and those kind of things. Like, for example, we want to talk about a guy that gets open. First play of the fourth quarter, play action. You have Ayuk running a deep post. He's open, and a poorly thrown ball results in a PBU by the defense because Garoppolo doesn't have the arm strength to get it out there. But even if Garoppolo had an arm to reach the end zone, with where he threw the ball, it would have been an incompletion because he wasn't leading the receiver to the open area where he was running to. So I think that's an issue. And I don't know if Trey Lance is going to be the guy that solves that issue. Didn't really see those two connect enough in training camp. I thought they would have been much better in training camp. There was one like really good one down the right sideline in training camp we saw in the highlight reel. There's a couple of times they connected, but like the flow of those two wasn't quite what I thought we would see. But then, it all fell apart against Seattle. And so we never really got a chance to fully see what that offense would look like. So we'll get a better view of this as next year comes around.
Yeah, for sure.
So, all right. I think we beat up Jimmy enough. Let me ask you this one. We'll wrap it up with this question. 49ers have a lot of injuries, don't they?
Too many. too many injuries.
What do you, if you were looking at this, what would you say is kind of causing these injuries, or how could they overcome them moving forward?
Team has a weird outlook when it comes to playing on turf. It's almost like this built-in excuse or thought that they're going to get injured every time they play on turf. It's always brought up, and it happens. It ends up happening, and I get it. It happened, 2020. You went to the Jets, you went to the Giants, and you didn't come out of there so healthy. I understand those things. But there are teams that play most of their games on turf that don't have as many injuries. So I think that's an interesting mindset. I think there's something to that. It plays into it a little bit. But also, it's tough because we just don't know anything about this staff, really. We don't know what's important to them. And when I say staff, I mean like the medical staff. Mm-hmm. Matt Barrows wrote a really good article, and I don't have The Athletic, but somebody had sent me screenshots of the article. Shout out to you. And he talked about how this is the first time that the media, hasn't really had access to anybody on the medical staff, and how that's a very strange thing. It's like, what are you hiding? Because what you're doing isn't working. So what secret are you hiding from everybody? But I don't know. It's tough because they revamped the medical staff. It hasn't gotten better. I hear, and again, I'm not there, so this is tough for me to say, but I hear that Kyle's a little bit opposite when it comes to Harbaugh. Harbaugh was really all about going really, really tough early on, leading up to the season and first couple weeks of the season, and then pulling it back a little bit. And Shanahan's a little bit opposite. He kind of eases into things, and then he ramps it up as the season goes. And that's usually when bodies are falling apart. So that's an interesting style, in my opinion. I would think to go the opposite way, the Harbaugh way. But I don't know. I mean, there's so many factors that go into this. And then there's the factor of, what are the players doing with their off time? Are they being told to do certain things and then they're not doing those certain things, and so it's leading to these injuries? I don't know. It can't all be dumb luck. It can't. There's something to it, but I don't have the answers, Jack. What do you think?
No, I'm with you, and that's what I wrote. I wrote an article when I was still writing for Sports Illustrated about this topic, and you kind of hit on a lot of those same things that I wrote then. Is, I hadn't been attending practices at that point, but in talking to people that had been at practice and getting an idea of what those practices were like, and knowing what I knew of Jim Harbaugh and his approach and the things that he was saying and the way that I'd heard about his practices going and so on and those types of things. And then also, as an old guy, I remember spending time up in Rockland watching the 49ers of Bill Walsh. And they didn't have one practice a day. They had two practices a day. And the physicality of those practices versus now what I have actually seen, I feel pretty comfortable with what I wrote in that article, is that the 49ers practices aren't physical enough. Their bodies aren't getting ready for the pounding that they're going to take once the season starts. And Brent Jones mentioned that yesterday on KNBR. He does a show over there every Monday, and he even mentioned it, how back, it's important to get your body used to getting hit and getting twisted in different ways and hitting the ground and doing all these kind of things. like I said, 88, 89, when I was early in high school, going up to Rockland, and I got to stand along the ropes and watch Ronnie Lott and Roger Craig and, teams that won the Super Bowl beat the living heck out of each other in a goal line drill. And like, it wasn't, I'm going to thud you up and I'm going to hold you up. It was, I'm going to take you to the ground and we're going to, it was physical, like extremely physical stuff. And they were doing this all while doing, 2-a-days throughout it. And now Kyle Shanahan holds a practice, and they're typically, if it goes over an hour and a half, it's a long practice, and I think there's definitely something to what Coach Harbaugh used to say, which is about building up a contact callus, and that's kind of what Brent Jones is talking about, and all this kind of stuff. And I'm not saying that it's soft, but I don't think they're getting their guys ready. I think that's the biggest thing. We hear this a lot, right? I mean, think about this for a second. Were guys that much bigger during the day of Ronnie Lott than they are now? I mean, I know they're faster, but they weren't much bigger, right? Those were big dudes back then. And I know there were some injuries, but it wasn't, I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'm dating myself and I'm saying like injury, I'm not trying to say injuries aren't like, keeping things from getting injured aren't important, but what they're doing isn't working and it needs to change.
Yeah. And kind of let's go full circle. Let's bring it back to the beginning, Jack. When somebody asked you what the 49ers need to do to get better on offense, and essentially your answer to not only the injuries, but also how they get better is to do something different. Try something different. You have these things that are in place, these structures, these components that are in place and how you think things should be ran. The shit's not working, man. It's not working. Change it. Try something different. Because the injuries they're not getting any better. The 49ers are consistently near the most injured teams in the league. Even in 2019, they were able to overcome a lot. And luckily, they're not necessarily season-ending injuries, but this is a reoccurring theme also, just like the offense struggling is a reoccurring thing. So if you continue to have the same issues, but you don't change things and try something new, that's literally the definition of insanity. So at what point do you change and try something? You know what? Let me try it this way, because my way may not necessarily be the best, or hell, I might not even be at fault, but let me at least try something different because it's not working. So let's switch it up. It's like the foresight, the ability to not predict. What is it? Be proactive. The ability of proactiveness is lacked in a lot of areas with this team, I feel like.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And I also think that it comes down to this, like when you're talking about injuries, or especially when you're talking injuries is one piece, try to do something different. Let's kind of wrap it up with, when it comes down to the lack of execution, let's go back to that for a second. I just kind of wrap it up on the lack of execution for the offense. And I think, I think that if you're an old guy, or if you've never, maybe if you haven't had a chance, go rent All the Right Moves. It's on one of these streaming services, and it's the Tom Cruise movie from when he was young, and it's a football movie with the coach, the guy that did coach. Craig T. Nelson is the coach, and they're at practice. The plays aren't getting run right, and he gets into his face, and he basically the line of the movie that's always stuck with me, and it stuck with me through my playing career, and after when I was doing some of the other stuff that I've done in football since then. But when you're the head coach, it's my way or the highway. You either do it the way I tell you, or you don't do it. And I get, like, you want to be friends with you want your players to like you, and they obviously like Kyle Shanahan. All the players talk positive about Kyle Shanahan.
For sure.
But these guys they've either got to start doing what you expect of them, or they sit on the bench. And how many times are we going to see these guys, certain players, make mistakes before they don't get the ball to them anymore, or they're no longer playing XYZ position on the line of scrimmage, So that's the biggest thing for me. I don't have a problem with Kyle Shanahan's play calling. From the standpoint of his plays get people open, I do think that he gets away from the run a little bit sometimes that he shouldn't. He doesn't really have an offensive identity, but the plays that he called in Atlanta weren't the reason they lost. Their inability to execute was the problem, and that is his fault, and it needs to be done his way. And if this is his way, the 49ers will never win a Super Bowl.
Yeah, absolutely. Looks like you got a super chat.
I do, and we'll wrap it up with that. James says McVay does the same thing, and they're injured less. I don't know. I've never watched a Sean McVay practice, and they are injured less. Maybe they get guys who are maybe they have a better train staff. I don't know. I don't know what their practices. I can only go by what I've seen, and I think a lot of teams probably do something similar, but I don't know.
Yeah, and I'm sure that they do, but they do the same thing up until what point? The training staff's not the same. The injury history of the players is not the same. Are we saying they do the same thing in training camp? Are we positive that they have the same philosophy throughout the whole season? Are we sure about that? I mean, I'm sure it's similar. I mean, there are a lot of variables that go into that make it not close to the same thing. So I don't know.
Yeah, neither do I. We're giving our best takes, and I'm giving you my best thoughts from my history and what I've done in the past. So I don't know. We'll see. We'll find out what happens. 49ers got a big game coming up, and on Saturday they got to get this win, get over 500. They fall behind under 500, they'll have a chance to get back there the following week in LA against a team that they've pretty much owned during the regular season lately. So anyway, Jesse, you got anything coming up here on Last Second Sports?
Yeah, 2 minutes. I got a show over on my channel, so we'll continue the talk. And then tomorrow, this has gotten to be a lot of fun, going behind enemy lines, where every week I bring on a content creator from another team, and we discuss basically everything around their team to learn what we can about the opponent going into the game. And it's been a lot of fun. So definitely tap in over at Last Second Sports.
Yeah, go check it out. If you're not following me and you're not following Jesse, go give him a follow over there. Subscribe. That's what it is on this platform, not a follow. This isn't Twitter. Come on, Jack, pull it together. But as my good pal Raphael 5629ers, who is a member of the Toolbox, always says, on your way out, guys, do me a favor, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and then also get yourselves to 49ers.pressdemocrat.com. Check it out, and then get over to Jesse's channel as well. Have a great rest of your Tuesday, everybody. I will be back with you soon. Take care. Talk to you all later.